Hey guys, it's Grace, and today I'm going to be filming a video that I have already filmed. I'm going to start off with some tips and tricks for how I find monologues, and then I'm going to move into all the plays that I think that you should read if you are aspiring to be an actor, whether you're going into college or you're not going into college. These are some plays you should know. So my first tip on how to find monologues is to simply just read plays, and this is probably the most important tip that I'm going to give you because it is one of the only ways that I find monologues that are usable and that are good for auditioning. So with monologues, it's a little bit tricky because sometimes they will let you do things that they don't normally, and sometimes they're very strict about what they want for requirements. How I get all my monologues is I have a large collection of plays that I will go through and just skim through the play, look for chunks of text that are longer, and I mark them off in the book. And obviously you can play with gender, like you don't have to do a female monologue if you are a female. You don't have to do a male monologue if you're a male or you identify as whatever else. But sometimes the requirements obviously are going to be more contained because if you're auditioning for a female role, they probably want you to do a monologue by a female unless that character is more androgynous or something like that. Most of the time they're going to want you to stick with whatever alignment you choose, but obviously if you don't identify with that, then you can choose whatever you want. It's really up to you. It's really more about you connecting to the monologue on a personal level and being able to understand the monologue and relate to it. Well, I find plays at thrift stores, at just garage sales, church sales, anything like that. Anywhere where they're selling books, they're probably also selling plays. And I think it's really important to have a wide variety of plays in your collection, and also to read plays in general. As actors, you need to be able to understand how different playwrights take a look at things, and also you need to be worldly in your knowledge of your plays, because professors will ask you about them, and it's just stuff you should be reading plays as an actor. If you find a monologue online, make sure that it is actually from a play. So this is what I was talking about in the beginning, where some directors will want one thing, some things want another. Usually they will want you to have a monologue from a play, especially if you are auditioning for a play. It's a little bit different when you're auditioning for a college program or something like that. My program personally didn't mind having monologues from film or from a musical, but usually if you're going to be auditioning for a conservatory or a BFA style program, you don't want to do a monologue from a musical or from a TV show or anything like that. You want to do one from a play. So the reasoning behind this is not only because if you're auditioning for a play, you should have something from a play, but it's also the fact that it's going to have so much more information on your character, especially versus finding it from one of those monologue books where it's just the monologues alone. You can find a lot of those online, and I would recommend not using them unless you can find that they are from a specific play. So if they pull a monologue from a specific play and you're looking on the online website, you want to buy that play, either e-reader or physically purchase it, and read the whole thing if you are going to be doing that monologue in an audition setting. Why this is important is because people will ask you about your character, they will ask you about the play, especially when you're auditioning for college shows. A little bit less when you're auditioning for just a general audition for a show, but sometimes they will. And you cannot fully understand your character unless you read the whole play. You don't know where they're at in this monologue. You don't know what's happened before and what's going to happen and how they progress as a character. So how are you able to fully portray that character if you don't know what's been going on in the rest of the play? Those are just some tips I have for finding monologues. Really the big thing is just reading plays, having plays available, and then it's really easy if you physically have them to just go through them and figure out what monologues from that play are right for you. Also, suggestion for auditioning for things, especially in college programs, never do a Shakespeare monologue. I say this as I did a Shakespeare monologue to audition for this program, but a lot of the times places don't want you to do it because you haven't had enough acting experience to be able to do it justice and do it well. And obviously they're looking for progress, but it kind of puts like a bad taste in their mouth if you don't have a lot of experience with Shakespeare and then you're trying to do a Shakespeare monologue. If you like have done Shakespeare all your life and that's all you've ever done performing, that's a different story, but use your best judgment. So now I'm going to move on to the 10 plays that I have suggested, and these are in no particular order. They're not like best to worst or whatever, less best. They're just in a random order. The first play that I have is Othello by Shakespeare, and obviously I'm going to recommend that you read a Shakespeare book if you haven't already. If you haven't, bad on your school for not making you do that yet. But this is a really easy read in my opinion. Compared to other Shakespeare plays, it is an easy read because there's really only one plot line and it's pretty steady throughout. The language is a little bit easier to understand, the story is easy to understand, so it's a lot better than having like 5,000 different plot lines going. That can get really confusing in a lot of Shakespeare plays, and it's a classic. It's great. My second recommendation is Angels in America by Tony Kushner. This is an incredible show. It is a little bit graphic, a little bit intense, but I think that if you are going to go to college for this or you're going to go out in the world for this, you have to know this play. It's a very well-known play. It was recently on Broadway. It's an incredible story, and it's more modern, so it's a lot easier to understand, but it also delves into a lot of themes that I think are very important. My third suggestion is August Osage County by Tracy Letts. So this is a great show. It's also a more modern piece, but there are a lot of characters, and it's got that like family dynamic aspect. It also has a lot of really interesting set choices, which I think is cool. And this is another one where like it's a classic. If you haven't read it yet, you're probably going to read it in college or talk about it in college, so why not get a head start? Number 4 is a new play, and it's called Here, H-I-R by Taylor Mack. This is about a transgender male, and they go by here instead of any other pronouns, and it's kind of like the family dynamic surrounding that. So there's a mother who is very controlling over the dad, who's basically a vegetable after he had a heart attack or a stroke, I can't remember which one. And then the other brother comes home and his sister has now transitioned into his brother, and it's just the family dynamics of that, and I think it's a very relevant topic to today. And I also think it's very helpful if you are a theater artist, because especially with transgender teenagers now, I know that you can feel very alone and like you're the only one going through what you're going through, and this play does a great job of bringing those issues of today into a more normalized setting. Number 5 is another classic. It's The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams. If you don't read The Glass Menagerie, I recommend reading another one of Tennessee Williams' plays. They're just classics. They're going to be talked about all the time in whatever experiences you have. It's a great show. It's also a great show to discover memory plays and that style of a play, because it's very different. It has a lot of flashbacks and a lot of fuzziness surrounding the dialogue and surrounding what's happening, and I think that's just a very interesting point of view that you may not have experienced as a high school student. Or if you're older and you still haven't read it or experienced it, do that. Number 6 is another classic, and although this is not my favorite play, I understand why it needs to be read. Oedipus by Sophocles. You probably know the story. If you've taken any like AP English class or higher level English class, they've probably talked about this story. But it's a classic story, and they will constantly bring things back and talk about this concept. And in psychology, if you're interested in psychology, this is also another concept. So all around, whether it's in acting or in the world, you are probably going to hear about Oedipus. It's a classic. I think that's really important. It's also very different from Shakespeare, so I think it's good to get a variety of the different kinds of classical or older theater. Number 7 is Pygmalion by Bernard Shaw. This is a really great play. I love this play. This is what My Fair Lady, I believe, was based off of. I don't know the timeline. I think this was written first and then My Fair Lady came, but this is a great play. I love this play. If you've seen My Fair Lady or a fan of My Fair Lady, you're probably gonna like this play. Really great. It's more of a classic as well, but it's easier to read and a lot more fun to read. Number 8 is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. You really cannot go through life without having read this play, or at least having knowledge of this play. It's really great if you're interested in the Salem witch trials and what happened. It's not exactly 100% accurate, obviously. Not a lot of the information or spin-off things that have happened from that or surrounding that are 100% accurate, but it's an incredible take on that, and it just shows the dynamics of like what happens when people can lie and how that works in court and how that works back then and how unjust it is. It's a very interesting take. Number 9 is Our Town by Thornton Wilder. Coming from New England, this is kind of a staple in our education. I read this play in 7th grade the first time I read it. I read it again in high school, and then this year I read it a 3rd time because my school had chosen to do Our Town as one of the shows. And I think this play is very underrated. A lot of people find it boring, but I think if you read it multiple times, the first time you read it, you might think it's really boring, it's just really basic, there's not a lot of depth to it. But then if you wait a little bit and you come back, especially getting older and having a new perspective and almost being ready to leave and go out in the world and get away from college and that kind of stuff, it has so much more of an emotional connection to me, especially because I grew up in a small town and this is the kind of life that I experienced or would have experienced back in the day. It's a very versatile play. It can be applied to any time period, and I think it's just something that you have to read multiple times in order to be able to appreciate it. And the last play that I have is another Shakespeare piece. It's Taming of the Shrew. This is another like mildly inappropriate one, but like you're high schoolers, you can handle it. I wouldn't recommend reading this if you are any younger than high school, but it's a hilarious show. It's one of the shows that I feel Shakespeare has a strong woman character, even though some things happen that change that, but I think that this is a classic show to read, especially if you're getting into Shakespeare after Othello. Like, this is a little bit more complicated, but it has a plot line that we can all understand and appreciate and relate to, and it's hilarious. I love it. Alright, so I've done a lot of talking about a lot of plays, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's a little, my videos have been a little bit different lately. I've been focusing more on like theater aspects and stuff, so if you guys like that, please give this a thumbs up and subscribe down below for more. If you haven't already, you can check out my previous video on this side of the screen and my previous vlog on that side of the screen. I hope you guys are having a wonderful end of the semester, not too stressed out, hopefully, and yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.